Right, hello everyone. You're all very welcome. You're probably just dropping in anyway, but you're all very welcome to this March's LinkedIn live conversation with Simon Dunant. So just to set the scene a little bit, in case you don't know who we are. So the Digital Learning Institute, we're the global leaders in digital learning education and certification. So very much working with individuals to help them advance their careers in the whole area of digital learning design. And increasingly over the last 12 months, we've had more and more students from the customer education field, I'm really just delighted to be having this conversation today around the whole field of customer education, because it's a really exciting space, and I guess a space that's really important for organizations. And Simon is probably the leading voice globally to set the scene there as the leading voice probably in customer education. And what we want to try and do today is probably demystify the space, maybe just talk about the history that it's gone through, what good practice looks like in customer education, what does a typical day in the life of a customer education professional look like. And so in terms of the format for the session today, I have a series of questions that I'm going to go through with Simon. Will introduce himself in a couple of minutes as well, but we will have loads of time at the end for kind of an informal Q&A. So if you do have any questions as we go through the session, please type them into the chat area. Hopefully you can see the chat area there. We may answer some of the questions as we go through it, but if we don't, there will be the guts of 20 minutes at the end for a Q&A with Simon and myself as well on this whole area. So hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Because sometimes when you're in LinkedIn Live, it feels like you're in a studio without any sense if people can hear you or not. So you might just let me know in the chat if you can hear me okay. That's all right. Okay, or even Fergus, if you're there, you can let me know. But okay, great. So Simon, I might just hand over to you initially, just for a bit of an introduction, if that's okay.
Yeah, pleased to be here. Great to be talking with everybody on the call today. I'm Simon Dunant, and I've worked in customer education for over 15 years. I've actually stopped counting, even before it was called customer education. Really, it's born out of product training, and I run an agency called Courseprofs, which helps businesses build their academies and their customer education programs. And for the last 6 years, also worked with a large organization called Engaging Networks, which runs a very big customer education program, and I've managed that for the last 6 years too. So I've got a lot of experience in this space. I've kind of gone through all the twists and turns, the roller coasters, the ups and downs from the start right to where it's grown now. So I'm really excited here today to kind of shine a light on that and bring my experience and help out the viewers today on giving them some insight in what's it like to be inside customer education and where is it now?
Yeah, because such a different context, I guess, if you particularly if you're working in, let's say, in internal learning and development, but obviously customer education, the context is quite different. So maybe we just start off, Simon, just with a bit of, I suppose, setting the scene in terms of, what's kind of the history of customer education, how has it emerged, and why has it become so, I guess, important, particularly over the last number of years?
Yeah, well, I mean, for businesses, obviously, training people on their products is key to actually keeping customers, right? A well-trained customer is a long-term customer because they know the value of what they're using and what they've bought into. So really, I mean, years ago, it started off probably, 15, 20 years ago, probably always been there, really as product training. If you had a product, especially in the internet space, then in some way, somebody had to be responsible for training the people that were using your product. And back then, it really was kind of usually either customer support or account managers that were training these people, and it was taking up an enormous amount of their time. Putting people into rooms, 50, 100 people sometimes, right, from clients that wanted to use these products. So really, customer education was born out of that and has kind of grown in the last 5 years. I mean, the aims of customer education is similar to the product education side. It's probably expanded a little bit more, but its aims and goals really has been emerging in the last probably 5 years out of that traditional product training, and it's really a more formalized and organized discipline within organizations where people have started recognizing that there's value to training their customers more efficiently. And companies across Europe and in the US, worldwide really, they've been investing in building customer education teams for their businesses. I would say it's more mature in the US rather than the EU. The EU is catching up. EU, UK, this whole area is it's quite wide open in terms of opportunities. As I say, the US is much more mature. But customer education, really, I describe as kind of commercial focused training. Digital product training can move into things like channel partner training. So, third-party organizations that work with a business, they are ancillary to the business, and it might be a slightly modified version of customer education, but you're training those people as well. In terms of goals, I mean, the main goals, obviously, for a customer education department is obviously to train their customers so that they keep them. More recently, I think the rise of customer education kind of tracked and followed the rise of SaaS products, right? Software as a service products, something you go online as a user, sign up for, and it's kind of very self-service, and you never actually have to you might have to call support, but you use all this online information, right, to kind of guide you through that. And it's a very efficient way of training your customers. But if you don't have a good kind of customer education program to help keep those, then basically they'll leave, and that's called churn, right? Okay, yeah. So the turnover of customers. Now that's bad for business, So that's one of their main goals, really, is to reduce the churn. Yeah.
And any kind of I suppose research done on the impact of customer education on churn rates, or is it maybe too early to tell at this stage?
I mean, it has been done to research, but again, 5 years, we're actually still really young in the customer education space. I mean, pretty much everybody who's built any kind of customer education online will see an improvement in their churn rate, right? Even if it's simple, just bunch of videos on YouTube and directing people to YouTube. It doesn't have to be very advanced. It really is that simple, right? Yeah. So getting that organized does reduce the churn rate. I mean, for example, Engaging Networks has a 98% retention rate. And obviously there's quite a big team of people that are working on that. There's account managers, and there's customer support, and all of a ton of people working there. And it's a good example because it's a reasonably large organization that works with very large non-profit organizations all over the world, right? And when they introduced the Academy and their help center like 4 or 5 years ago, like it not only obviously really provided some sort of structured learning for their customers, but I think one of the other benefits there is that it also took away a real big heavy lift from their support team and account management. They weren't going into rooms. It really assisted online learning. And here's the thing about customer education and this online learning side is it's an assist to the support team and account management, not a replacement, right? So I'll give you an example. Onboarding for a support team or account management team can mean spending a lot of face time with customers, especially new customers, teams of people, and matching up all of their kind of times and everything across the world, wherever they are. It's really, really difficult. So they do a lot of repetitive training as well, right? Okay, click here, do this. Here's how to get started. Now, if you can take all of that heavy lifting away, put that in a self-serve context for the customer to go away and do those kind of simple stuff, but heavy lifting, all the account management team and the support teams end up actually speaking to the customer about the stuff they never got to before, which is specifics about them. So that's another massive benefit.
Huge value. I mean, absolutely. The more you talk about it now, like the application there's a huge business case for getting this right, really, isn't there? And you mentioned there kind of academies and so on, Simon. Like how are organizations typically structuring their customer education teams at this stage? What does that typically look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have a slide if we can bring it up. I think your backroom technical guys can bring that up on screen now. I'd really like to actually show the kind of customer education general touch points that people. This is a mature kind of organization, right? So if you have a look at customer success right in the middle, that's usually where customer education sits in a mature kind of organization with or without customer education, right? So they'll typically have client support, you'll typically have sales and marketing, and you'll typically have product people. And this customer education, the third kind of column here, is where it gets built out. Now, what I'll say about this is this looks like, okay, there's a lot of people working in it, but typically when I started at Engage Your Network, like kind of 6 years ago, all of those 4 things that you see there, which is a director of customer education, which manages and measures the implementation of success, and the learning designers who kind of, decide what should be built, and the content creators, that can be one person at the beginning, right? Doing all those 4 jobs, right? Now that looks like a lot of work, but actually it's an opportunity, especially for people who want to get into the customer education from another section. If you have skills in kind of managing, the technical implementations of learning systems, or even simple help desk systems, and you can do a bit of learning design, and you can create some content. For organizations that are really early on in the stage, right, you could jump in and actually kind of get in here. But what you'll find is when a customer education team gets started, whether it's a one person, which it usually is, and then expands, is very quickly they will kind of interface with so many different parts of the business, right? So support teams will come to you with the challenges, which you will turn into the training. Sales engineers will come to you and say, here's the time we're spending with XYZ customers onboarding. Could we do something about this? Sales teams, marketing teams. Then the partnership teams get on board and say, oh, okay, can we kind of like train our partners as well? And then you end up going over to the product team and finding out all about, all the things that you need to build into the training. And then your job is to push that back up to the customer success, and then perhaps get marketing involved and kind of help them promote that. So I think this is a really good slide. I mean, this looks like a mature, as I say, organization, but really the customer education usually starts out with kind of 1, maybe 2 people at most, and then expands into this. But it's useful to see what the disciplines are, I think, of what is kind of expected in that area.
Yeah, no, it's a really good slide here. I know there's, and by the way, guys, if anyone has any particular questions here on that slide, because I know just while we have it up, just shoot it in. And just out of interest, do you find that people are from a career perspective, are transitioning from client support into CE, into customer education, or are they coming from sales and marketing? Like how does that tend to work in organizations?
And I think it tends to be skewed towards client support, because you have to have the mindset of solving that challenge for the customer, right? But you're doing it in a different way rather than the one-to-one FaceTime kind of on the phone or via an email, right? That's the firefighting side. What you actually have to do is kind of bring over your solutions to kind of reduce those firefighting, which obviously then improves the churn, improves the customer support experience, etc. And lets the client support guys and the AM guys get on with what they need to do, as I said before. So what you're trying to do is actually come in with a more long-term solution to solve any of these challenges. So you're having these conversations with people, which I used to find really interesting to have. It's like, how can we build something that will completely eradicate this problem so you don't have to deal with it again? Which client support just never have the time to do.
Yeah, like it's so problem focused, really, isn't it? I mean, sometimes that would be when you're talking maybe to in-house learning and development professionals. Sometimes that the ability to define the problem isn't always as maybe as easy. But when you're talking about, I guess, customer-facing products, it's a lot more tangible to a certain extent. Great. So I see that that role of the learning designer, because obviously a lot of our students will be in that space. What do you think? What do you think is important? Like, or even if we go on to maybe the next question, Simon, in terms of like what does a good customer education experience look like? And I guess the role of the designer within that.
Yeah. So I think we're probably done for this slide at the moment. But in terms of focusing on learning designers, so what you're going to be looking at there is building out some sort of structure. Sometimes when you start a customer education program, you don't have a budget, so you might have to kind of bootstrap yourself. I mean, that's certainly how we did it at Engaging Networks. The first thing that people usually do is try to get some sort of content out, right? So that might be some sort of online help content, videos, articles, etc. And they tend to be a bit fragmented. They end up on a blog, they ended up on a YouTube channel. And then that tends to get formed into an online help center, right? Which is generally article, but can be video formats. And then the next stage pretty quickly is like, how do we then measure that content, and how do we kind of bring in some kind of training academy, which is guided learning, which we can take people through a user journey. And I think that's where learning designers can help here, because they will have the understanding of, okay, we can find out what the challenge is, but what's the best way to deliver that? And I think building some kind of like business academy for customer education means that you can actually sit down and work out some learning journeys to get people kind of trained up as experts in the product, right? And as soon as you empower them with that, then those problems and challenges go away. So you're thinking about kind of like micro learning. Micro learning is very big because people don't have a lot of time when they're trying to do their jobs and learning about a product to dive in and dive out. Building shorter courses and putting them together into learning paths, and thinking about what the journey is for those particular kind of customers, and they might be different cohorts, etc., and stuff like that. That's where learning designers can really make an impact in customer education, because obviously support teams, they know all of the answers, but they don't have the time or the knowledge to actually structure those. So that's where I think we can give value here.
Yeah, and I just see Elaine from HubSpot is here, and she just makes the point that they're certifying their, as part of their customer education, they certify their customers as experts as well.
Oh, absolutely. Well, this is the thing, right? I mean, for example, Engaging Networks, which is the biggest company I work with, they work with non-profits all around the world, and non-profits aren't known for like investing in their staff's education, professional education, right? They don't have the budget to do that. So if businesses can come in and help their clients certify some of the skills that their staff have, it's a real bonus for the business to be able to offer as well.
Yeah, because they're giving like it's a career. There's a career development aspect to it then, and then
absolutely.
And I know like you become certified with HubSpot or certified with Google, Google Analytics. I mean, that would be, so that's kind of in that space already. Yeah, great. And in terms of a best practice experience, then I know you've kind of touched on some of this already, but what would a good customer education experience typically look like? I know you mentioned things like micro-learning and learning pathways and cohort-based learning. And any other observations on that?
Well, I think it also kind of loosely follows things like the ADDIE model. You need to analyze, you need to design, you need to develop, you need to evaluate, right? You need to implement and evaluate all of that. So again, somebody coming in and it's much looser in customer education, right? Because in formal education, academia, or even in kind of HR and the typical type of learning development, this is much looser. You have the freedom to kind of build your own ADDIE model effectively if you really want to, right? And add on to that. So whatever gets the job done. I mean, even 5 years in, we're still learning how some of this stuff will apply and pulling stuff in, whether that's multimedia skills or learning design skills. We're pulling from a whole range of really rich skill sets, and it's coming together in customer education. And it's a super mix of people that I meet every day that have these really skills. And a new one comes along every day. To go into that mix to improve it. So that's why I find it such a fascinating place to be at the moment.
Yeah, no, it is. It really is. And your passion is jumping out through the screen, which is great. And Elaine is just asking here if you just go maybe a bit deeper into micro learning, because I mean, obviously you can see the fit. Like there's an obvious fit between micro learning or learning in the flow of work and customer education. Is there any insights into the top examples of micro learning that work quite well, or typically what that typical?
So people like the hit of completing something, right? I mean, ultimately, customers are usually trying to find a solution. Now, on a help center, people will get in, get the information, and get out. But then there's a slightly bigger kind of challenge you're trying to solve, which is like, how do I generally use the software? What I find tends to work slightly better and has a better kind of like completion rate and engagement rate is having like mini short courses that solve a particular problem, right, in an LMS. So better to have lots of short courses in a customer education LMS where people can come in maybe, for up to 45 minutes or even an hour max with kind of 10-minute lessons that they can pick up in their coffee break, right, and go through and like, oh, okay, right, I've learned that little section. And then they can at the end of it, guide people through to the next section so that they can kind of do that same thing maybe the next week or the next day, and build up on their education that way. That tends to be really, really successful, and I've seen a lot of uptake doing that. So in terms of micro learning, I think it's, as I say, bit by bit, but also not having massive courses, right? People get scared off by those massive courses because that's just not how they consume media outside of work, outside of learning, right? So their mindsets are, watching a YouTube video where they get the answer in kind of 15 minutes. So.
Yeah, particularly from a customer education perspective. I like that idea, I guess, Simon, of maybe designing the content in the context of the problem and not just here's the how. So if you are in this scenario, this is what you should look at doing, and then here's some micro resources to help you. And I think a lot of the time with micro learning, it's about choice. About giving people flexibility in the type of content, whether it's video based or whether it's a blog or a checklist or an infographic or some sort of maybe quick demo video. But even if they want to always about giving them the option to go deeper. So I could read maybe a blog then if I want to go a little bit deeper, or listen to a podcast if I want to go deeper again. So I think sometimes with micro learning, it's a little bit about choice, because the more choice you give, the more personalized it feels. But I really like that idea that you mentioned there about designing customer education from problem down as opposed to content up, to a certain extent. That's really
absolutely
great. So if I'm working in the customer education team, and I know it's probably a small team to a certain extent, like what would a typical day in the life look like? It sounds very exciting, by the way. So, but typically, what would a typical day to day look like, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, the exciting part about it is that generally, because customer education programs aren't kind of that mature, for organizations that are just starting out, you have the option to contribute. So if you are starting from scratch, it might be things like selecting the right learning management system for the customer education program, building out a learning content production process, working out those course curriculums, going around talking to people, seeing what content's out there, gathering that together, finding out the challenges, and then kind of placing that content in the right places in that journey. Basing that on the business goals and learning about the business. And one of the great things about customer education is that you get involved in areas of the business and sit down with people to talk about the goals on a range of stuff. You kind of have to work right across the business rather than just seeing yourself as somebody who works within the customer success. You have to be that person that pulls in those people elsewhere. So a lot of conversations across the business on how you can get input from the business, and also how you can expand out into the business, and just building that general learning strategy for customers. If you're joining a team that's already growing in customer education, then you'll probably be looking at things around expanding course curriculum. So they might have started and have a bunch of content, and they might have tried to put it in some sort of format, but then it's more kind of like picking it apart and making it better. So that would probably be more around kind of content production, building and managing content pipelines, organizing content updates and stuff like that, and looking for new areas of business where customer education can help kind of remove those training heavy listings that I mentioned before. And for larger, more mature customer education programs, the focus might actually be on developing out things like metrics, measuring the return on investment of the customer education program. Because at the beginning, it really is kind of like, you get out there, you build a minimum viable product and get it running. But content teams, who are managing those pipelines and they're repurposing content, etc., then they have to go back and kind of refine it a lot. So, if you're going into a mature business and you have any kind of analytical skills, then those will be sucked up really, really quickly.
I think obviously having a strong evaluation strategy for customer education is it's important for any learning intervention, but you can I suppose what typically for in-house learning and development, sometimes the link from, let's say, to business impact can be the most difficult step to make. So how do I show a tangible impact on business results from, let's say, a leadership development program or some soft skills type training, and even customer service training to a certain extent as well. But I think with this, you've got a lot of KPIs to work off, whether it's churn rate and customer satisfaction. So I think that ability to performance consult sounds like a really important part of the role, and it's something that we would talk to our students about. That you need to be able to stay connected with the business and to be able to have problem conversations. And particularly in this customer education space, I think that is even probably more important. So great. So I think, and I see Josie, you just dropped in there. This is recorded, I think, Fergus, isn't it? We were recording this, so anyone that's missing, we'll get the, or if you missed the start, we get the recording out to you. So I guess just the last question before we get into the kind of general Q&A is some of the opportunities and challenges for learning professionals, to move into customer education. So a lot of our students will be existing learning professionals or people transitioning into learning design. And for those that might like to get into this space, what any kind of tips that you would give them?
Yeah, I mean, the customer education space does continue to grow. I mean, obviously, the tech sector in the US particularly has been hit with a lot of layoffs. So, when they have layoffs, you tend to lose learning and development people, right? Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, they still need their customers coming in more than ever, right? So that's why in those particular markets, actually, a lot of learning professionals in the US are moving over to kind of the customer education side. In Europe, I think we're still, there's a lot of SaaS companies in Europe that still don't have a customer education kind of program. And if they do, it's very, very basic. So the opportunities here are to jump in and contribute. I think, what you really need to do is look at your transferable skills. You need to be open to tweaking these, morphing them into a more commercially focused kind of revenue-driven environment. Content production is a heavy focus, having good content. So if you've got any skills in kind of, creating really nice looking content that really hits the mark, then, bringing that to the customer education side is really valuable. Professionals in multimedia skills. I know getting a little bit specific, like, in the learning development side, things like Articulate, Storyline, Rise, all of those kind of authoring tools have been staples. But I think in the customer education side, it's a little bit more looser and it reflects kind of the more general web consumption. So video skills, writing skills, those are kind of two of the main things. And coupling those with your understanding of learning design, and keeping up to date with kind of like the latest tools, and focusing on building your skills and general web skills. It's kind of a little bit like marketing, but not marketing, right?
Yeah, no, it is. There's definitely, it's kind of that blend between marketing and learning design in a little bit, But I think you're right. I think for a lot of that kind of articulate type courses, they're just too time consuming. To obviously with customer education, it's about agility, it's about speed, it's about obviously updating it. So I think obviously from that perspective, that has to be considered in terms of the authoring technology. And in fairness, like the likes of Rise and Genie and Elucidat would have a lot of.
Well, they all have their place, but the massive freedom you get in customer education is from that you could just build what you need. And as you say, the agility and speed to delivery is important, right? Because if customers are kind of like leaving or there's a churn, right, then you have to get something in place as quickly as possible. So I think there is a massive freedom that you get, and that's the excitement of kind of getting into the customer education space.
Yeah, no, it is really exciting. But and I just asked the question around, and again, if you don't, even if you've heard anything around it, I suppose maybe the potential impact of artificial intelligence now in not just customer education, but across the whole customer experience, customer success landscape. Any initial observations there?
Exciting times in AI. I mean, we created the title of this LinkedIn Live from ChatGPT, right? It gave us so many options. Yeah. I think AI, rather than kind of replacing people, I think it is assist, right? It's AI assist. It can do a lot of things. ChatGPT, you can put a lot of stuff in there and it gives you a great starting point, right? But you can never really replace your unique set of experiences that you've experienced through life, right? I've ended up in this position getting all of this experiences without AI. And it's very difficult to kind of replicate those experiences because AI kind of looks at what works, but I think you have to go through some of the missteps and learning experiences to kind of really get that experience. So I think, there is a place for AI in learning, and I think it's going to take over probably most of the web. Over the next kind of 5, 10, 15 years, it will be a very different landscape. But I think at the moment, use it as an inspiration, use it as a starting point. there's some great stuff out there, but don't underestimate what you've learned and what you can bring to the table as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. And I mean, Elaine's just making the point there. You can't underestimate the value of knowledge bases and SEO for customers to get them to. And then, and ChatGPT was a fantastic assistant in new courses, but absolutely we need the humans to refine it. Okay, great. Okay, so listen, I think that was really I know it's a really insightful conversation so far, Simon. So guys, we have some time now for a bit of a Q&A. If people would like to put some questions into the chat, if you'd like to go deeper into any of those areas. So does anyone have any questions they want to ask Simon?
I'm just looking through the
comments,
questions now. Somebody, I think it's Marie Claire Kelly, was asking about rolling out a new LMS, embarking on a customer training journey. So yeah, one thing I'd say about rolling out an LMS is it tends to come a little bit later after you've got a bit of content and you want to kind of organize it. And what I would say with learning management systems is it's just get started with it. People ask me all the time, how many courses should I launch? I would say pick your 3 biggest problems and focus on those, right? I mean, we started at Engaging Networks with one onboarding course, and it solved a massive challenge of getting people in a room, which was expensive and time consuming, and getting them doing the repetitive training online. And that one course really transformed things, and it showed the value of the learning management system to the business. And we bootstrapped that on Moodle. It was literally on a server. We built it on Moodle. Later on we moved to a SaaS LMS afterwards. But it really gave us the opportunity to kind of prove to the business what the value of the customer education program was. And then that very quickly started expanding. So I would say if you're rolling out an LMS, don't think like, I've seen somebody else's academy and it's got like 50 courses and they're all structured this way, right? Everybody starts with the first step. So just get your first 1, 2, 3 courses out for your biggest challenges, and the business will support that.
Yeah, and you're right. I think focus more on the course and maybe initially less on the platform. And sometimes the experience that you're looking for will then dictate the type of platform that you need. I think sometimes when I'm talking to organizations about learning management systems, it's important to have your content strategy clear first, and because that will ultimately inform then decisions you might want to make on platforms. But just out of interest, generally speaking, do you find that organizations typically use learning management systems and learning platforms for customer education, or does it tend to be more flexible where they might have stuff on YouTube and LinkedIn and because I mean, how do you generally see that working?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things is you want to get metrics, right? So having people log into a formal learning management system allows you to guide them through that. And I think, self-discovery is great, and YouTube channels really do work for a time. But at some point, you do want to kind of move to a formal program so that you can measure the effectiveness on the back end. And you can certainly do that through views, but you can't tie it to a user. So having it tied to a particular user. I mean, here's an example. The LMS we're using at the moment at Engaging Networks allows us to have something called a group analyst feature. What it basically does is it allows you to have put the training tracking in the hands of a company, right? So Engaging Networks serves nonprofits. The nonprofits has a bunch of people that are trying to use this product, right? So you can have a team leader at the organization that you're serving, and they can track their own kind of little group of people. And that's great because, you don't have to, the account managers don't have to interact with that client on their training progress. They can do it all themselves. So, look for those kind of things where the learning management system can help the client help themselves as well.
Yeah, I think that's really a good point. Like the more you kind of allow them to have ownership over analytics, the better, because and so giving them their own dashboards and so on, and visibility on data. I think that's a really good point as well. And a lot of LMSs will be set up for that, but I definitely think that would be a consideration. And so it's a question there around the type of tools. I mean, I think we were discussing earlier that it's, there's definitely a focus on micro learning. So I'd be kind of looking at tools that facilitate that. So your 7 Taps, you might have heard of 7 Taps is a really good micro learning tool. Your Elucidats, your Genie is a good micro learning tool. Rise obviously on the articulate side. So anything that kind of can facilitate authoring of micro content, but even any kind of video-based learning as well will be in that space.
Yeah,
right?
Camtasia is very popular in the customer education space, for sure, because obviously you can do the animations and stuff like that as well. So actually on that point, that's a very good point, is like, what type of content you use. A lot of the customer education content, especially around kind of SaaS products, tends to be like screen recordings. But what I would say about that is like, don't forget to put a human in there. If the person's recording it, right, try and like overlay their face into it as well, because otherwise you get a ton of like just like watching a computer screen, right, working, which is great. Click here, do this, etc. But having a person just overlaid in the bottom right hand corner really brings the human aspect through that, because self-serve can be, even on micro learning, can be like a lonely space, right? So put some people in there.
And it gives it credibility as well if the subject matter expert is in it as well. And particularly with AI now, like that credibility element will become more and more important. And so sorry, go on,
One other little tip is that if you run conferences and you record those, or you have webinars, right, go in and repurpose all that stuff as well. You don't have to record new items. If you've got a library of, a rich library of content already, go in there and like pull out those snippets, etc., and put those in. And if you've got somebody presenting a case study or one of your clients, these are things you can pull in for that as well.
Case studies. Any insight? Is there a lot of simulations happening? So you mentioned, like, let's say a screencast or like demos of the software. Like, would you see any kind of where the customer can go in and actually interact with the software in like a sandbox and do kind of practice sessions? How popular is that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if they're already a client, then they'll probably have their own account and they will follow along and try to build that. And actually, that's another thing to think about is that if they aren't clients, that tends to be on the kind of pre-sale side, but it doesn't matter because customer education can help with that too, right? So they might well be in like a sandbox or have a sandbox account. So what I would say is that think about the context of where that's going to fit in that side. But certainly there are tools that you can have interactivity as well that you can embed in your LMS or have on your website where people can actually go and follow along. And I'm sure most learning designers will have used something similar to follow along with.
Yeah, an interesting question here from Samuel. So I'm struggling a bit to build education around a large product area / concept. It feels a bit all or nothing. How do you prioritize where to start and do so whilst making sure that initial content supports ongoing development for the whole thing?
Yeah, I know. Well, this is the thing I was mentioning, right? Is like it can feel overwhelming, especially if like you've got a mature business that needs such a big amount of stuff doing, right? You can only ever take the first step, right? That's why I said pick your top 3 challenges and go from there. You'll soon find that the business does come in and supports it once it sees the value, right? And then wants you to do even more. For example, right, we started the Client Academy at Engaging Networks, okay? And then it was very quickly like, how can we then accredit the web partners that help our clients, right? So then we set up this accreditation program alongside the client side, and suddenly we had 2 academies: academy for partners, training partners, how to help our clients and use product. We were running a client academy, and then of course, Engaging Networks was about 50 people. We didn't have a HR, so they said, "Well, can we set up a staff academy?" So we suddenly had a staff academy born out of customer education, funnily enough, because they didn't have kind of that side inside. So you'll find people come out of the woodwork in the business and actually show you where you should be focusing your time very, very quickly. But I would like say, just start on the biggest 3 challenges, right? Don't worry about a bigger picture. It's always the same when you're trying to build out this. You can see the possibilities, but you need to build out that timeline to get there, a realistic timeline to get there to avoid overwhelm.
I think that's a good tip, Sammy. Just like identify the top 3 pain points with the product and build from there initially, build down from the problem. And I think probably reaching out to your stakeholders to find what they are, what those pain points are, or even the customers themselves, because you'll get a lot of buy-in if you take that approach. With a product training, like it could be, I don't know the product that you're looking at, but it's like you could be quite fast in terms of where do I even start here, or do I have to go through the whole customer journey with the product? Or so I think like Simon said there, identify all the challenges or pain points with it, and then build down from pick the top ones. And Elaine has a tip for you as well, I think. So Samuel can also think about layering. If you'd like to look at it like a pillar page. Oh, I like that idea, where the overview of everything is on the main page and the subtopics are available as links within the pillar page, so that the learner can choose what topics or some they want to learn.
That's a really good point. Actually, if you go over to engagingnetworks.academy, I've actually structured their academy exactly like that. So it's in kind of like categories. So it's actually a good example of how to do a self-serve academy at engagingnetworks.academy. What I would also say is I've seen more and more, rather than structuring it around like the product and the actual kind of areas of the product, I'm also looking to expand their academy out into kind of job roles. And because we have a lot of content now, I'm going to kind of put a secondary page where people can go and say, I am a X. And like, these are the courses you will probably want to take, like, a tracked kind of development program for somebody who's like a campaign manager or a marketer or, whatever their role is, or I'm an analyst, right? And then once you have that kind of mature content that you can pull from that library, you can then construct it into kind of job roles. I mean, ideally, I probably would have started there. Maybe you should, if you're in that position, and thinking about roles, job role journeys effectively. So there are many ways to do it. It just depends what works for your audience, really.
You can see there the overlap with marketing again, just with Elaine's point there around pillar pages, and because obviously that would be a typical approach for SEO as well. Like so
yeah, of course.
Yeah. Kind of, I suppose it's identifying how you structure the pillars. Do you do the pillars by job roles, or do you do by I suppose a feature in the product? So that's probably. But I like that idea of doing both. Both. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, also I'm toying with the idea of having a questionnaire as well. It's like, what do you want to achieve? And this is probably where you mentioned like AI coming in eventually. Maybe this is too early, but this is like my ultimate thing is like, I want to achieve X, and then some AI bot would come in and like construct those courses and bring them in, or pull in resources and construct that. And I could see ChatGPT potentially, like if you could build a learning model from your own individual content, that would be amazing, because you could literally over time serve your customers well. So that's a little bit glimpse perhaps into the future.
But I don't think we're too far off that. Like, I mean, ultimately that's probably where it's going to go, where it'll be question based, where it'll be, I suppose your customer education will be essentially a type of ChatGPT. But obviously we're getting, you have to feed it though. Yeah. So like, I mean, if you go to ChatGPT now, you're getting content from the wider web, but in the context of customer education, it needs to be content from the actual customer, the product itself. So investing in your content is going to be worth it, but there might be a layer on top of it, like a search engine, AI-based search engine, where it will help you find the right content at the right time.
That's it. And you mentioned SEO, and this is an important thing, because people spend time like, okay, what's the search function in our learning management system like? How good is it? And it's like, most people are probably going to Google and trying to first look there for the answer to the question. So you're right. If you're structuring your help center, if you're structuring your learning management system, try to make it very SEO friendly. It's a little bit more difficult with learning management systems because, a lot of the content is gated behind that because it has to have a login. But certainly things like landing pages for enrollment pages, there's a lot you can do there, and on the general kind of LMS. Not every LMS is gated, but obviously you have to have a login to track a user, right? So those are tips. It's that people probably aren't searching or starting their journey on the actual platform where you're delivering that learning. You have to think about like, Google and the search engines out there, because that's where they're generally looking for the answers.
Yeah, but I think even though if you are asking people to log into an LMS, maybe the search feature should be up front and center, because I think they probably won't mind too much logging into the system, as long as they know when I get in there I can get it really quickly. It's the scenario if I go in and I have to go through reels of content to get to the problem. So maybe designing your platform from like search down as opposed to categories of content where they have to go looking for it.
That's exactly it.
Probably the way to go. Yeah, but okay, great. Okay, guys. So any other questions? We're just going to start wrapping up now. Simon, that was a really interesting, it's really exciting space. Like you can definitely see there's a huge overlap with learning design, but also with marketing as well. And so I think it's like one of those kind of multidiscipline type professions, isn't it? In terms of the ability to work with the business, the ability to bring marketing into it, but also learning design. I think is going to become more and more in terms of differentiating customer education from your competitors. like I think the quality of the actual experience and it will be really important as well.
Yeah, okay. And one last thing I would say, John, is that for people out there that are viewing this, is that if you're looking for a job in customer education, don't always necessarily go out there looking for the existing jobs. And I'd say this especially in Europe, right? Is go to companies and suggest some of this, right? Because they may well be looking for it, but don't know how to hire for this because it's so young, right? 5 years is nothing in this space, right? So be proactive. I mean, you know, that's how most of my job. Be proactive, go to the company, show the benefits, and say, you know, can we test this out maybe on a short-term 6-month basis and see what I can do for you, right? It really is very much that you are the master of your own destiny here right now, and it's a massive opportunity for people who are looking to move from learning and development into customer education. You know, those are all hidden jobs, so be proactive and take what you've learned today and apply that and go knocking on some doors.
And you know, network and, you know, position yourself as a CX educator or CX trainer. I think that kind of, you know, that will give you a bit of like, you know, foot in the door and just open. I think you're right.
Companies don't always know that they want this, right?
But
when you turn up at the door and you present it to them, they're like, this is a great idea, let's give this a go. So it's amazing opportunities.
You don't know what you want till you have it, I guess, you know. Okay, great. Listen, Simon, thanks a million for the time. It was a really great conversation. So we will record this, podcast it up and send it out to people, and obviously you can reach out. We'll obviously share Simon's details as well. So again, Simon, thanks a million for your time. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining the conversation today.